Okay, let's unpack this. So picture this scene. It's 2007, you've got bomb threats hitting a high school, and the FBI is scrambling to find who's responsible.
Right, a really serious situation.
And one of the tactics they ended up using, well, an agent actually pretended to be a journalist, created a whole fake news article, emailed it to the suspect, all hoping he'd click a link to help identify him. It sounds pretty out there.
It definitely caused a stir later on when it became public. In that case, the Timberline investigation, it's more than just, a wild story. It really opens up this whole complex area where law enforcement tactics bump up against the digital world, privacy, civil liberties, all that.
Absolutely. And that's exactly the intersection we're diving into today. We've pulled together some maybe seemingly unrelated sources. There's a U.S. Department of Justice report digging into that specific FBI case. Then we've got a guide on cybercrime investigations from Europe, from Turkey, actually. And then, looking way ahead, an Interpol white paper on crime in the Metaverse.
It does sound like a bit of a strange mix, yeah. But the goal here is to connect the dots, right? We want to see what these different perspectives tell us about judging these kinds of tactics, how cybercrime gets investigated generally, and what the future of policing looks like in these digital spaces.
Okay, so let's start with that Timberline case. The basics. Bomb threats. Timberline High School, 2007. The investigators zeroed in on a suspect. They call him Charles Jenkins in the OIG report.
That's the one. And the big problem was they didn't know who he actually was, just his online persona. They needed to connect that to a real person, a real location.
So how did the press angle come into it?
Well, apparently a behavioral assessment suggested that appealing to his ego using a press angle might make him more likely to interact. The initial idea wasn't like a deep undercover thing. They thought maybe, 3 contacts, tops.
Not aiming for some long-term confidential source relationship.
Exactly. So the tactic they settled on was this fake news article. Put in Associated Press, an AP byline on it, made it look official. The title was something like, "Bomb Threat at High School Downplayed by Local Police Department."
Oh, trying to pique his interest.
Right. And the idea was simple. Email him a link to this fake article. If he clicks, it deploys this tool, CIPV, it was called. In this case, not for its original purpose related to child exploitation, but just to grab technical data.
Like his IP address, basically.
Yeah.
Stuff to help pinpoint him.
Precisely. Use something credible looking to get him to click, get the data.
But this didn't exactly stay quiet, did it? The OIG report mentions it hitting the news later, around 2014.
Yeah, news reports started questioning the methods, and the Associated Press, understandably, was not happy. They formally protested to the Attorney General at the time, Eric Holder. Other papers raised concerns, too.
And what was the FBI's response to that blowback?
Well, the OIG report cites a letter from the FBI director then, James Comey, to the New York Times. He basically defended it, saying the tactic was, and I quote, "proper and appropriate under Justice Department and FBI guidelines at the time."
At the time.
Right. He did add that, today it would probably need much higher approvals, but he still maintained it would be lawful and maybe even appropriate in rare cases, as he put it.
Okay, so that begs the question, what were the guidelines back in 2007?
The sources mention internal FBI manuals, the MIG-2 and the FGUSO, essentially their rule books for undercover work. They made a distinction. There was undercover activity, short-term, like maybe 3 contacts or less, usually needing just supervisor approval.
Right.
And then there was a full undercover operation. That meant more contacts, or crucially, if it involved what they called sensitive circumstances. That needed higher approval from the special agent in charge, the SAC.
Sensitive circumstances. Okay, what fell under that umbrella?
It covered situations where there was a significant risk of the agent getting into a privileged relationship. Think lawyers, doctors, clergy, and importantly for this case, members of the news media.
Ah, so impersonating media potentially fell into that sensitive category right from the start.
Potentially, yes. It posed a significant risk of creating that kind of relationship. It needed approval from FBI headquarters.
So the Office of the Inspector General, the OIG, looked at this case against those 2007 rules. What was their take? Did the agents follow the playbook?
It's a bit nuanced. The OIG said, look, based on the initial plan, very limited contact, maybe just that one email click, it wasn't unreasonable for the agent to think, okay, this isn't a significant risk. I don't need HQ approval yet.
But something changed.
Something definitely changed. The OIG report points to a later message the team sent to Jenkins. And in that message, they specifically assured him something like, writers are not allowed to reveal their sources.
Ooh, okay, that sounds like it crosses a line.
That's exactly what the OIG thought. They saw that as creating a risk that Jenkins would believe he was forming a confidential relationship. The OIG called it an implied promise of confidentiality.
Wow. So that one sentence, that assurance, was the critical misstep in their view.
Pretty much. The OIG concluded that once that message went out, the team really should have reevaluated. They felt it now did pose that significant risk, and at that point, they should have gone to their SAC and likely upped the chain for HQ approval for sensitive circumstances, but they didn't.
So the initial tactic might have been borderline under the old rules, but the follow-up really pushed it over, and the proper approvals weren't sought. Did this whole episode lead to policy changes?
It absolutely did. The OIG report mentions a new interim policy came out in June 2016, right while their review was wrapping up. And the OIG called this new policy a significant improvement.
How so? What changed?
It's much clearer now. The new policy explicitly prohibits impersonating the media unless it's part of a formally approved high-level undercover operation, and the approvals needed are way higher.
Like, who needs to sign off?
You need the head of the field office, the FBI headquarters Undercover Review Committee, and the deputy director of the FBI, who first has to consult with the deputy attorney general.
That is a significantly higher bar. Much harder to do now.
Massively harder. And the OIG notes of the FBI basically said this higher bar was because the First Amendment concerns the worry that impersonating journalists could, chill news gathering more broadly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's now reserved for very rare, very high-level situations.
Okay, so that Timberline case gives us a really concrete example of the ethical and policy tightropes involved. Let's zoom out now and look at the bigger picture of cybercrime investigation, drawing on those other sources, the Turkey Guideline and the Interpol report.
Yeah, and those sources really hammer home just how huge the challenge is for law enforcement everywhere. Criminals are just incredibly quick to adopt and exploit technology.
They move fast.
Super fast. So you see traditional crimes, like fraud or drug trafficking, just moving online. But you also see entirely new types of crime that only exist because of the technology. Law enforcement is constantly trying to keep up, adapt their tools and techniques.
And dealing with digital evidence itself is a whole different ballgame compared to, say, finding a fingerprint.
Absolutely. It's got unique properties. It's often invisible if you don't know what you're looking for on a device. It's incredibly volatile, can be changed, deleted, overwritten so easily, sometimes accidentally.
But it can also be copied perfectly, right? Which is weirdly also a problem.
Exactly. Perfect copies raise questions about authenticity. Which version is the original? Has it been tampered with? So this fragility on one hand and easy duplication on the other means you need really strict rules for handling it if you want it to hold up in court.
The Turkey source mentioned some globally accepted principles for handling electronic evidence. What are the key takeaways there?
Yeah, they laid out 5 core principles that are pretty standard worldwide now. First is data integrity. Basically, don't change the original device or data. You work on copies.
Makes sense.
Second, audit trail. Document everything you do. Every step taken with the evidence needs a record. Who did what, when, why.
Like chain of custody, but super detailed for digital stuff.
Exactly. Third, specialist support. You need trained digital forensics experts for the heavy lifting. It's not usually something a regular officer can just figure out.
Okay.
Fourth, trained first responders. Since specialists aren't always right there, the first officers on scene need basic training on how to secure digital devices without messing things up. Don't turn it off. Don't start clicking around.
Got it. And the last one?
Legality. Everything has to be done according to the law and ethical rules. Search warrants, procedures, everything by the book. These principles are vital for making sure the evidence is reliable.
And the types of cybercrime law enforcement are up against, which it's a huge range, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it's staggering. You've got malware, think ransomware, locking your files, viruses, worms, then all the social engineering scams.
Like phishing emails?
Right, the generic ones. Then spear phishing that targets specific people, whaling, going after the big bosses, CEO fraud, or BEC where they pretend to be an executive. The list goes on. Plus massive data breaches, identity theft, and really grim stuff like online child exploitation material. It's vast.
And then Interpol looks even further ahead, talking about metacrime. What does that involve?
So the Metaverse, these immersive virtual worlds where people might spend a lot more time and money in the future, Interpol sees this as a new frontier for crime. Metacrime is just crime happening in or using these virtual spaces.
Like what specifically?
Things we're already starting to see glimpses of. Fraud involving NFTs, those digital assets, identity theft using realistic avatars or maybe deepfakes, harassment, stalking happening within the virtual world, even things like defaming someone's avatar in a way that hurts their real-world reputation.
Wow. Investigating that sounds incredibly difficult. How do you even police a virtual world?
It's hugely complex. Just tracking people online is already hard with VPNs, TOR, ways to hide your real identity and location.
Right.
Then add the fact that cybercrime constantly crosses borders. The criminal might be in one country, the victim in another, and the servers hosting the Metaverse platform or storing the data in a third, or multiple other countries. Getting legal access to evidence requires complex international cooperation.
A logistical nightmare.
Pretty much. And policing the metaverse itself, Interpol points out huge forensic hurdles. Where is the evidence? It could be on the user's device, like their VR headset. It could be on the company's servers, probably in the cloud somewhere, needing subpoenas. It could be on the platform's records of user activity. If crypto or NFTs are involved, it's on the blockchain. It's scattered everywhere.
And the Interpol report also flagged concerns about artificial intelligence, AI, in the metaverse.
Yeah, big concerns. AI could be used to create criminal opportunities, maybe generating scam environments or highly convincing non-player characters, NPCs, designed to trick people, or AI systems themselves could be manipulated. A major worry is the black box problem with some AI.
Meaning we don't always know how it reaches its conclusions.
Exactly. We see the input, we see the output, but the complex process inside is often opaque. So how do you trace actions? How do you predict risks? Who's liable if an AI facilitates a crime? How do you handle data privacy? And could the AI have biases that affect investigations or unfairly target people? Lots of tough questions.
So adapting laws and policies seems absolutely critical then.
Paramount. That's a key message from both the Turkey and Interpol sources. We need laws and policies that are flexible, using technology-neutral language so they don't become obsolete overnight. They need regular updates. And critically, it requires international cooperation between police forces and also working with the tech platforms themselves. These are global problems.
Okay, so let's bring this home. Why should someone listening care about FBI policies from 2007 or policing the metaverse? How does this connect back to, everyday life?
Because it's not abstract. The tactics police use online, how they investigate digital crime, the rules for new spaces like the metaverse, these directly impact your privacy online, your security, the kind of digital world you live in. Understanding these issues helps you be more aware online, aware of the risks, aware of the difficult balance law enforcement is trying to strike.
Right. It affects the safety and the freedom we experience in the digital sphere.
Exactly. It's about the environment we all increasingly inhabit.
So we started this deep dive looking back at a specific FBI tactic, that impersonation case, almost 20 years ago. We walked through the principles for investigating cybercrime today across borders, and we've peered into the future at the really complex challenges of policing virtual worlds.
It really shows how fast everything is changing and how the core questions about balancing security and rights keep reappearing in new technological contexts.
Which leaves us, and you, with a final thought to mull over. As technology keeps accelerating, how do we, as societies, make sure law enforcement has the tools they need to fight crime effectively in all these digital spaces, from email scams to the metaverse, while also protecting fundamental rights like privacy and free expression and dealing with the unpredictable ethical twists from things like AI? That balance seems like it needs constant ongoing reevaluation.